J.R. Reid and Stephen Ganzberger served on the USS LCI G-65 during World War II. The initials, LCI, stand for Landing Craft Infantry, and LCIs have an incredible yet mostly unknown history. LCIs had the most dangerous job of all. Their job was to deliver Allied troops onto enemy-held beaches during the first waves of invasions. The LCI-65, like all LCI ships built during World War II, did not have a name. That was one of the things that made LCIs unique. Each ship was only given a number. J.R. Reid enlisted in the U.S. Navy on December 23, 1943, and was assigned to fight in the Pacific Theater. Seaman Second Class Reid joined the crew of the LCI-65 on June 9, 1944 at Homestead Lagoon, Mira Island. When Reid reported aboard in June of '44, the LCI-65 was in the middle of being converted from a large-class landing craft into a more heavily armed LCI gunboat. Basically, this meant that the U.S. Navy was converting many of their LCI landing craft into floating tanks by adding bigger and more powerful machine guns. The Navy was going to use these new powerful LCI gunboats to help protect the troops as they landed in the first waves of invasions. Even after 70 years, J.R. Reid still remembered all the different guns and where they were aboard the LCI-65.
40mm was midship up on the upper deck behind the conning tower. That's where the 40mm was. Had a 75mm, which we call 3-inch. It wasn't right on the front. It was a space of probably about, I'd say, at least 30 feet. Maybe I'm just guessing. I don't know exactly, but I would assume that's where it was. Because they had a compartment up front of that you could open up a manhole and go down in the compartment and right on the tip of the bow up there. They had 250s on each side in front of the 75mm up there, one on the port, one on the starboard, and they had 220s, one on each side, right behind the gun thing there, and then they had the two on the stern and the 40mm up on the upper deck behind the conning tower. Four of them. There's four on the whole ship. Two midship and two on the stern. Two on the midship there and two on the stern. There was 250s up forward, and I think there was 250s that was on the port side and starboard side up with the 75mm. Later on I went up and was a gunner on a 50 caliber on the starboard side.
So total, you guys had 10 machine guns.
Yeah.
However, this meant that the more big guns the LCI-65 added, the more men the small ship needed to operate them. This eventually caused the size of the crew to double, making a crowded ship even more cramped. 5 months before J.R. Reid joined the crew, another sailor, Stephen Ganzberger, also joined the crew of the LCI-65 on January 16, 1944. Like Reid, Stephen Ganzberger also remembered what it was like converting his landing craft LCI into a heavy gunboat.
But we didn't land any troops. They changed this. We had a no square console. We eliminated the ramps off of it, and we put a 3-inch 51 and a quad 40 on there and some more 20mm. We was heavily loaded for a little fella for firepower.
And each man was assigned a specific job aboard the ship.
I was what they call a quartermaster. I used to take care of like all the charts and make sure the ship was all set navigation-wise, for the captain and the navigating officer.
I was a ship's cook 3rd class. And we cooks used to stay pretty close together. We just cooked and that's it. We got up in like 4 o'clock in the morning. We didn't get through late in the evening, so we didn't talk to many people. We hit the site pretty early. I had several of them that, offhand, I don't remember the names, that we'd sit around on deck shooting the breeze when we went out to work.
But Reid did remember some of his closest friends on the ship.
Well, there was a Holstein guy from Idaho that he was a cook, and he passed away in 92, I believe. Honstein, H-O-N-S-T-I-N, George Honstein. One guy was Johnny Markham out of Louisiana, and there was a Lloyd Reid out of Arkansas, spelled his name R-E-E-D. And Greco, Anthony Greco. He was a head cook in there from New York.
Reid also remembered his shipmate, Stephen Ganzberger.
I knew he was a quartermaster, and I'd see him coming through the chow line, and they had their group of friends, and a bunch of us was together a lot, but he came aboard in the 16th of January in 44. Well, let's see, James K. Reid, signalman out of Virginia, because they worked up the conning tower together. They don't do it at the same time up there a lot of times, I imagine. Because Reid was a signalman, your dad was a quartermaster, so they had to be up in the conning tower when we was underway. Somebody did. They was on different shifts. I don't know whether DeWitt's still living or not. He was a motor mech. Paul DeWitt. There was a gunner's mate, Overson. I believe, let me look over here and see. Yeah, the Overson, a Reeder, Henry Heyman Reeder. I don't know whether he's still living or not. I know that's 4 of them. Which was pretty well pals.
But very often, the enlisted sailors and officers who served aboard LCI ships in World War II did not get a lot of respect. At the start of the war, many Navy officials, at all levels, looked down on LCIs because of their undesirable jobs of crashing onto land, which was an unforgivable sin to top Navy brass. Some even looked at LCIs as expendable. And because of this, LCIs constantly struggled to get basic supplies from the bigger ships and Navy supply depots. Another LCI veteran and cook named Elmo Pucci said that the bigger ships rarely helped them out when they needed critical supplies like food and water. Therefore, Pucci said this caused the LCI crews to swipe whatever supplies they could swipe, even if it meant outright stealing. J.R. Reid and Stephen Ganzberger remembered an amusing story about how the crew of the LCI 65 got caught stealing beer from a dry dock.
Well, that there is kind of complicated.
On June 20th, 1944, the LCI 65 entered a dry dock called Landing Craft Repair Unit No. 1 at Carter City, Florida Island, located across the channel from Guadalcanal. The ship needed repairs after a month of dangerous patrols.
For 30 days, we was tied up alongside of a coconut tree, and we was pulling the coconuts over so the Japs wouldn't see us. But every day we was getting dive bombed and straight. That's for 30 days. And then when we come back, we asked him for our beer allotment, and he wouldn't give it to us. The guys on the beach.
The men were supposed to be allotted 2 cans of beer. However, when the Navy supply workers refused to give the LCI 65 crewmen their beer, a small group of Ganzberger's buddies hatched a plan to steal the beer from the dry dock.
It might have been once a month we got 2. Maybe not that often. If we got in a port, they could get some allotted to us. They rationed it out. We didn't get it very often.
However, Ganzberger stated he was not actually one of the men who stole the beer from the dry dock.
No, and I wasn't the one that loaded it up on a ship. I wasn't the one that put it up in a forward box. I didn't go into it. That was why I kept my mouth shut. I should have opened up. Because if I'd explained my end of it, I wouldn't have got broke. Well, there was about 8 of us.
I think there was 5 of them. And that would be Reeder, your grandfather, Overson,
On June 27th, the men were finally caught by the dry dock's chief petty officer named V.F. Herbert when he noticed the missing beer.
Well, I know a chief petty officer on the island over there. I don't know how he got word about who got it or anything, but he came over and he got them all together. And this DeWitt was, he was in the regular Navy, and he'd been in trouble 3 or 4 times.
So even though Stephen Ganzberger didn't actually steal the beer from the dry dock, he took the punishment for his friend, Paul DeWitt, so that DeWitt wouldn't get kicked out of the Navy with a dishonorable discharge. By doing so, Ganzberger saved his friend.
And he got him, and he said, if you don't tell me who was in it, what y'all did with the beer, you're going to be kicked out with a dishonorable discharge. So he got together with the others and told them what was going to happen to him, and they agreed to let him go ahead and talk. That's the way they got caught.
So you took the rap for somebody else?
There was about 8 of us. And, I got pulled into it because I drank a beer.
In the Navy, someone's rank is called a rating. As punishment for stealing the beer, Ganzberger and his buddy from Michigan, Stuart Grant Oberson, were found guilty in a court-martial known as a captain's mast in the Navy and were demoted to the next inferior rating. Ganzberger was busted from quartermaster 3rd class down to seaman 1st class. Ganzberger would actually end up lucky with just a demotion. Sometimes the captains of the LCI ships would sentence their men to solitary confinement at the back of the ship, below deck, in a small cage for 5 days. And the temporary prisoners would only be allowed to eat bread and water during those 5 days.
We had the supply room back there, up behind the engine room. We kept dry supplies back there, and they had this little compartment back there. They'd lock it up there. They had a little cage back there, like if they wanted to put stores in them, they didn't want nobody to get in. They just take the stores out and put them in it. It has a wire around it, and it wasn't about 4 feet by 6 or 8 feet. It was very small. They didn't have sleep, and they could stand up and walk around a little bit, but that's about it. Usually, if they really did something bad, they'd transfer them off the ship somewhere and let them serve the time.
And that's exactly what happened to Ganzberger's friend, Henry Reeder. After the beer-stealing incident in June, Reeder got in so much trouble in July that he was found guilty in 3 separate captain's masts. On July 17th, he was charged with stealing property of the Navy.
He didn't get that out of the beer stealing outfit. He did something later on that they put him in the brig for.
On July 26th, Reeder was charged with insolence and drunkenness and sentenced to 5 days in solitary confinement with nothing to eat but bread and water.
I don't know what it was for. I guess insubordination. Let's see, they got here July 17, 26, 34, 44, stealing and drunk and insolent. They've got over here solitary confinement, so I don't know what all he did.
And on July 31st, less than 2 hours after getting released, Reeder was charged for failure to obey orders and thrown right back in the brig. This meant he would be on a diet of nothing but bread and water for almost 10 days in a row. But by this 3rd offense, the captain transferred Reeder off the LCI 65 and onto another ship, USS Rigel, to serve his time. No one was allowed to talk to Reeder or go near him while he was in the brig. But despite the harsh punishments given out by the LCI 65's captain, J.R. Reid remembered liking him and all of the officers aboard his ship.
He was a good guy. In fact, most of the officers got along with him good.
Macaluso from Cleveland. He was Italian. He played football for Notre Dame.
But the men had a war to fight, and American General Douglas MacArthur was moving closer to the Philippines with Allied forces. His next target was Morotai Island in western New Guinea. Soon, beginning on September 15, 1944, the LCI-65 would be locked in fierce combat for the next 4 months as part of MacArthur's 7th Fleet.
See this Halmahera here? You see that little bitty island right there? That's what they call Morotai Island. I invaded that one too. But then we come out of there, and then we went right to Morotai Island just to give us an anchor in an airfield. You know?
At dawn on September 15, 1944, the U.S. Army's 31st Infantry Division invaded Morotai Island. The Japanese airfields on the island were a threat to all Allied sea traffic en route to the southern Philippines. The airfield on the southern tip of the island had to be captured. The Gila Peninsula had level beaches which were perfect for an amphibious landing. On D-Day, the LCI-65 and the rest of the LCI gunboats in their group bombarded Red Beach and White Beach. However, during the bombardment, one of the men from the 65 was wounded while operating the No. 4 20mm gun at the back of the ship when an ammo round exploded. At 8:12 a.m., Seaman First Class Walter Winfred Henry's right hand and wrist were partially blown off when the ammo round accidentally exploded. J.R. Reid explained what happened to Walter Henry that morning.
Yeah, he was a loader on a 20mm, and when he put the magazine up there, exploded and messed his arm up. There were certain ways that if you didn't get the thing just right, one round would probably explode on you, and I think that's about all that exploded was one round. I'm not positive. It wasn't the whole magazine. See, it had to fit down in a kind of a slot thing, I believe, well, if I'm remembering it right. When you pick it up, it's pretty heavy. You pick it up, drop down in there, it's got to be just right, or it's going to, they said, that all these guns, they said it exploded, you didn't have it just right.
Henry was immediately evacuated to a hospital ship, LST-456, and he was eventually awarded the Purple Heart for his shrapnel wounds.
But it made a mess of his arm, I know that. He didn't lose it, but I don't think he could use it after they got him patched up. They got him off in about 15, 20 minutes. As soon as they get somebody, when they pick him up, we never did see him anymore. They sent him to the hospital, and he never did come back on board. I got a picture of the ship sitting offshore with a big ball of smoke going up over on that island over there. It was either the day we invaded or the day or two after. I'm not sure which, but I would presume it is since that big puff of smoke's there.
In the days following the invasion, the LCI gunboats were ordered to patrol the channel. Their job was to guard the channel to prevent the Japanese on Halmahera from landing on Morotai and reinforcing the island with more enemy troops. But the Japanese would not put up major resistance for the island. And after several weeks of fighting, the Allies captured Morotai. But before the campaign was over, Ganzberger witnessed something he'd never forget. The Battle of Morotai was the first time he saw a Japanese kamikaze pilot.
That was Morotai. That was the first one I ever seen, a Jap suicide plane. This guy was up at about 15,000 feet, and all of a sudden he just nosedived right at a freighter and just missed it by 50 feet. He went through the ship. And I looked on him, I kept watching him. I told him, I said, man, this guy's stupid as shit. He can't pull that plane out there. Well, he didn't pull it out. That was the first Jap suicide plane I seen.
It was an ominous sign of things to come. That would not be the last kamikaze the men would see.
And then from there, we went into Leyte Gulf. And that was an adventure.
month later, on October 20th, 1944, General MacArthur and the Allies invaded Leyte Island in the Philippines. The massive Allied invasion force was split into two groups, the Northern Force known as the 10th Corps and the Southern Force known as the 24th Corps. The LCI G-65 was part of the Northern Force that landed near Tacloban airfield. The gunboat's job was to protect the left flank of the U.S. Army's 24th Infantry Division as the troops landed on Red Beach.
We painted that camouflage color. We could blend in with the terrain up in there once we got up next to the shore. The invasion, we just went in and shelled the beach and came back out. If they needed us back in, we'd go back in and shell it again.
This is the Philippine Islands. When I went in there, the Leyte landing, that's where MacArthur walked on the beach, you know. He didn't impress me. I'd walk around with a pipe with it, you know. I didn't like him because he left Cartwright holding a bag.
2 years earlier, on March 11, 1942, MacArthur had evacuated the Philippines and fled to Australia when the Japanese conquered the island nation at the start of the war. But before leaving, MacArthur passed the command of the entire Allied force to his friend, Lieutenant General Jonathan Wainwright. MacArthur told Wainwright to hold on until he came back. In Australia, MacArthur swore to recapture the Philippines from the Japanese and rescue the Filipinos and his men. He declared to the world, "I shall return." But Wainwright was forced to surrender to the Japanese in May 1942. Wainwright and the rest of the 78,000 American and Filipino soldiers were then forced by the Japanese to march 65 miles while being beaten, tortured, and murdered the entire way. This infamous event became known as the Bataan Death March.
They marched them from Manila Harbor, and they went up this, they went right up here. And they wanted to get them up there so they could ship them off to Japan, but man, they was killing them guys off left and right. If you look crippled, they bayoneted you. Boy, I felt so sorry for them guys on that death march.
But MacArthur had kept his promise. He had returned with the 6th U.S. Army and invaded Leyte Island on October 20, 1944. It would be an epic battle to come. The Battle of Leyte began as MacArthur's land invasion, but within days it turned into a huge naval battle between American and Japanese ships, known as the Battle of Leyte Gulf.
See, this one, the Battle of Leyte Gulf, it would become one of the largest sea battles ever fought. It would be the first time the Japanese first used a kamikaze weapon as a weapon.
On the morning of October 24, 1944, a group of Japanese kamikaze planes attacked the American convoy in Leyte Gulf.
It was in Tacloban. It's like a city, and then right around the corner of it was this Tacloban Harbor. And that's where Grandpa was when they had like about 50 of their big suicide bombers come in. And right where we were standing, we could see them all coming in, and each of them pick out a ship and start diving at the ship.
The men on the LCI-65 began firing at the enemy planes with their 3-inch 50 caliber heavy gun.
We had a 75 millimeter that you could set the fuse on the thing for it to explode so far out, and they asked the skipper to let them shoot at this airplane. And they shot 3 times, and he decided he'd come over and take care of the ship.
So anyway, the last guy coming in, our 3-inch rifle was going, and you could see it, hit, trying to get that plane, and then all of a sudden, like, he turns like this and he starts coming down the mountain. I goes, oh man, here he comes.
Suddenly, one of the kamikaze pilots spotted the LCI-65 and began flying his plane directly toward them.
Sure hell, man. I was watching through the binoculars, and at that time I was steering the ship, see? And I kept watching him, and all of a sudden the doors opened up like this, and whew, he drops his torpedo, and I thought a bomb, I thought, man, is that guy stupid? I said, what the hell is he dropping a bomb way back there? I didn't think a torpedo,
The kamikaze flew toward the ship and attacked it with a torpedo, but because of the LCI-65's flat bottom, the torpedo passed underneath the ship without hitting it. At the back of the LCI-65, Stephen's friend, Reid Aiston, was shooting at the enemy plane with a 20mm gun and scored a number of hits on it. The ship's cook shot off part of its wing as the bomber was consumed with smoke.
He was manning a 20mm on the starboard side, on the stern, and I was on the port side with a gunner. I was a loader on the other 20mm. I knew the Johnson boy was a gunner on mine.
But still, the plane kept flying toward the LCI-65.
So I looked over and I looked at my skipper, and man, that guy was petrified. He couldn't even talk. So I just hollered down real fast, all engines ahead, flank, and I took that rudder and I kicked it over, and here's what the ship did. We turned it like this. So anyway, I kept looking at him like this, and pretty soon you could see that airplane was coming exactly where Grandpa was standing.
Tragically, the kamikaze plane crashed into their ship, killing his close friend, Reid Aiston. Aiston was killed instantly. At the moment he was hit, he was firing his gun in a different direction, so he never saw the plane coming. Aiston never knew what hit him.
Because I know Aiston never did know what struck him. He had his back to where the plane was coming in. And I don't know what happened to the loader. He might have run out of the way, I don't know.
The moment we turned it, he just caught the tail end of our ship. Either that or he'd have got right where Grandpa was standing.
And he came down on the stern and just wiped that starboard side out over there with Aiston on there. He was a gunner. It was a Betty bomber. It wasn't a fighter plane. He skimmed across the top of the stern. But he didn't, like I say, he took the engine, fixed the anchor up, and the gun tub on the starboard side.
That's the one that suicided into our ship, and it killed a kid from Ida, Michigan.
EISTON, Lester Eugene Aiston. We had a Japanese suicide plane, and he had his back to it when it come across the stern back there. He's a tall guy, kind of heavy set. He's probably 6'1", and pretty well built.
AISTON, he was a ship's cook too. He was a good kid. They took the cream of the crop and killed him. Yeah, a lot of kids got killed there.
Seemed like a mighty nice guy to have to lose his life like that.
It was around 9 a.m. on October 24th. Later that night, and into the early morning hours of October 25th, an all-out naval battle between American and Japanese battleships broke out in Leyte Gulf. It became known as the Battle of Surigao Strait, and it occurred just to the south of the LCI-65's position in the water.
The next day, right down in this pocket here, we had our ships. This was like the battle wagons and the cruisers and the destroyers. They put a big U out here, like a U-shaped deal. And right through this here, through the slot, come the Jap fleet. There was 26 of them coming up. And when they picked them up, they was doing like about 30 knots. And they was coming right up in a straight line. And the moment he got within, like, say, 6,000 yards from our ships, this Ohlendorf had our guys open fire. Well, these Japs, instead of dispersing this way, everybody turned this way. When he turned that way, out of the 26 of them, we got 24 of them.
Yeah, this Admiral Kincaid, he didn't have nothing to do with that Southern Sea battle. That was Ohlendorf. 6 battleships. He was the main guy, not this Kincaid. And that was a hell of a battle. I watched it all night long. They had that formation, what they say, cross the T. In other words, once you get in range of these, the battleship was like this, and they had all the guns on you. on the outskirts of it. I wasn't directly involved, but I watched it all night long when they were fighting. And Ollendorf is the guy that should get the credit. He crossed the T, what they call cross the T, like this. And anything that comes in, all their firepower is directly right on the Jap force. That's why out of 26 we got 24.
No, we knocked them right out. We got 24 of their ships. And the last two, next morning the aircraft carriers sunk the other two. So we made out pretty good there.
But the real enemy threat was coming from the north, not the south. A massive Japanese armada of ships, known as the Central Force, were coming from San Bernardino Strait. They were coming to attack the LCI-65 and the rest of the Allied ships gathered in Leyte Gulf.
We were lucky because, like, over here, their Central Fleet come down. Mm-hmm. And man, I looked out like this and you could see the Japs. Their destroyers out there. I thought, oh man, is this for real? But we got them.
This epic sea battle became known as the Battle of Samar. The Allies were massively outnumbered and outgunned, but the brave young American boys aboard the destroyers and aircraft carriers of Task Force Taffy 3 fought back heroically against the Japanese ships, and they somehow beat them back until the enemy retreated right back through the strait they'd just come from. On the morning of October 25th, Taffy 3 saved the LCI-65 and every single man in Leyte Gulf and on Leyte Island.
And when they had that sea battle out just off of Leyte there, we went up the river. Must have been 15 miles up either way. We wasn't involved in that thing. They had a pretty good battle out there.
Reid even remembered a typhoon that hit 4 days later, on October 29, 1944.
We had a couple of typhoons blow in on us while we was there. We got beached in a typhoon. We got broadside on the beach, and it took them about 5 or 6 days to get us off.
But 2 weeks later, the LCI-65 would again be targeted by a kamikaze plane in what would be one of the largest, deadliest, and destructive kamikaze attacks unleashed by the Japanese in World War II. Veterans who witnessed the kamikaze attack on November 12, 1944, would later call it Bloody Sunday. The typhoon from October 29th had caused so much damage to the LCI-65 that the ship needed to get repaired by LST-455, which was a landing craft repair ship known as USS Achilles.
We were over there getting we got a hole knocked in it in the typhoon. I guess it was a cargo ship broke loose and they knocked a hole in it. And that's the reason we was over there getting that hole patched up. It had to be fixed.
So on the morning of November 12th, the LCI-65 tied up alongside the repair ship. But while the LCI-65 was right next to the Achilles, the Allies were attacked by a group of 3 kamikaze planes, identified as Zeke fighter planes. One of the enemy planes headed right for the repair ship.
It was a repair ship. I think there was 4 LCIs tied up, 2 on each side. And they had a big opening in the center to go down into the floor deck. And they had a shop set up down there, and this guy went down and that whole blew thing out. They didn't sink it, but it messed it up pretty bad. There's quite a few guys got killed on it.
We was tied up alongside this LST, and there was another LCI in front of him, and he was getting underway, and we was going to pull up, and then all of a sudden, from nothing, when I told the old man that the Jap was there, he said, no, he says, there's no flash red. I said, I'm telling you, I heard a Jap plane. No sooner I opened up my mouth, down he come underneath the clouds, dove right into this LST, and man, that was no more than 50 feet from me where the plane hit.
As soon as the kamikaze crashed into the Achilles, fires erupted all over the ship. Other LCIs came to help, but the captain of the LCI-65, Charles Macaluso, allegedly refused to help the dying men from the burning Achilles, ordering his ship to evacuate the scene.
We was right alongside of him, and I listened, you know, and I told the old man, I said, man, there's some Jap planes up there. He said, no, we don't have a flash red. I said, there's a Jap plane up there. No sense that I open up my mouth and here he comes right in it. And he smacked right into that LST, you know. And you could see all them kids up there getting nailed. And I asked the skipper, I said, you want some of our guys to go over and give him a hand? He said, no, we're getting the hell out of here. That Macaluso from Cleveland. I felt so sorry for them kids. Blew them all apart. There might have been parts of it that blew on our ship from them kids.
I think everybody was so scared they didn't want to do anything then. Because it was pretty wild. There was a bunch of Filipinos out there, they brought some women out there, and I saw them jump off the stern of the ship. That's the only ones I saw go in the water. That may be the ones he wasn't going to help.
But the end of the war was in sight. In January 1945, Ganzberger fought in his last battle aboard the LCI 65. On January 9, 1945, the Allies invaded Luzon, the northernmost island in the Philippines. 4 days before the invasion, on January 5, 1945, the American convoy was attacked as the ships were on their way to Luzon. It began around 3 p.m. when the LCI 65 received word that there were 2 Japanese destroyers in the area and headed their way.
See, like up here, Zach, that's where Luzon Harbor is. And that's where we went. When we passed by Manila Harbor, about maybe 50 miles away from it, and pretty soon I looked up through the binoculars, and I told the old man, I said, man, there's 2 Japanese destroyers coming on our ass. So he hollers out to the Naval Air Force, you know, the carriers, and man, within a minute's time, they went right after them 2 destroyers and knocked them out. If they wouldn't have, they'd have knocked us out. See, we were right about over here, Zach, when they come out of this harbor, Corregidor Harbor, 2 Jap destroyers. They knocked them out in a hell of a hurry.
A few hours later, the convoy was attacked by a group of kamikaze planes. One of the kamikazes crashed into the LCI 70 nearby, killing 6 men and leaving 9 wounded. Ship's cook, 3rd class Royal Wetzel, was only 19 years old aboard the LCI 70 that day and remembered the kamikaze that hit his ship.
And then January the 5th is when we got hit with the kamikaze. On the other side was a 20 millimeter right across from us. And when we got hit with that plane, the kamikaze, one guy, he jumped from the 3-inch tub into the ocean. He dove in. And they were picked up right before it got dark.
Despite the damage inflicted on the LCI 70 and its men from the kamikaze, the ship was right alongside the LCI 65 4 days later as the 2 converted gunboats bombarded the beaches together on Invasion Day in Leyte Gulf on January 9, 1945. More than 50 years later, Ganzberger still remembered watching the massive bombardment that morning by the battleship USS California.
Leyte Gulf, we had the battleship California standing maybe about 6,000 yards out. And man, we spot this one pillbox, and we just radioed out to the California and said, well, we got a pillbox here. He says, can you handle it? Man, pretty soon you see, and you can see them coming. They're like slugs coming through the air. When we were like going in towards the beach, we had to pass to California. So we were, like, say, maybe roughly 500 yards, maybe 800 yards away from her, you know. And she had her 16-inch rifles there like that. And all of a sudden she goes, boom, and you could see it like around the wagon, like say for about 3 blocks, the water would just ripple.
Oh, yeah.
And that big wagon, it moves at 3 feet every time that big guns could fire off. And you ought to have been underneath it. Boy, my bones hurt from the concussion.
General MacArthur and the Allies eventually captured Manila, and with it, the remaining Philippine islands. Ganzberger left the LCI-65 on May 15, 1945. He was transferred to a hospital in the U.S. to recover from operational fatigue. J.R. Reid remained aboard the LCI-65 until the end of the war, finally transferring off the ship in March of 1946.
I left the 8th of March, 46. We was, I guess we was in South Korea, because it was getting ready to go on an invasion into Japan, and I guess our stop was going to be at Korea, so we got ready to go on over to Japan. I think we was in Korea when we found out the war was over. Best I remember we were.
Stephen Ganzberger passed away on May 20, 2011. He is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. J.R. Reid currently lives in Moseley, Virginia. He is 98 years old.
So, Mr. Reid, if you could give any advice to the younger generations, what's one piece of advice that you would give?
Lord, I don't know. It'd be hard to tell. I have no idea what I'd tell them, except be careful what you say.